Randy Meisner, whose vocal range helped catapult the Eagles to fame, has died. The soft-spoken bassist added high harmonies to classics like Take It Easy.
He gave the Eagles their most haunting ballads, and they gave him nothing back. When Randy Meisner died, one voice stayed silent. Don Henley. No tribute, no post, nothing. And that silence? It spoke louder than any memorial ever could. Most people only remember the high notes, the ones Meisner hit during Take It to the Limit, the ones that soared above stadiums and echoed through generations. But what they don't remember, or maybe never knew, is how much those notes cost him. Behind the soft-spoken smile and quiet presence on stage was a man who was slowly unraveling. A man who gave everything to the Eagles and got almost nothing back. The tributes when he died? Polite, brief, fading fast. And then Don Henley finally spoke. But what he revealed about Meisner's final years and their fractured past left fans shaken. Because Randy Meisner didn't just leave the Eagles left him first. Before the platinum records, the screaming fans, and the bitter backstage fights, Randy Meisner was just a quiet kid from Nebraska. He wasn't born into the spotlight or handed a record deal. He was born on March 8, 1946, in Scottsbluff, a windswept farming town where the loudest sounds came from tractors and the wind cutting through cornfields. His family worked in fruit farming, long, tiring days spent tending orchards, loading crates, watching the seasons change. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but it was honest. And for a while, it looked like Randy's life would follow that same steady rhythm. Work, family, harvest, repeat. But something inside him tugged in a different direction.
Don and Glenn had asked me to play up in San Jose. That's where I first, because I had met Don and Glenn down at the Troubadour, just bumping into each other. And they had asked me to play with her up in San Jose. Little did I know, I thought they had,
It wasn't rebellion, exactly. It was something softer, more like longing. He'd sit by the radio late at night, listening to Elvis Presley, Little Richard, the Everly Brothers. Those voices sounded like escape, like color in a black and white world. And he didn't just want to listen, he wanted to create. He picked up the guitar as a teenager, but it was the bass that stuck. There was something about it, how it held everything together, kept the rhythm tight, but stayed out of the spotlight. It was the perfect metaphor for who Randy was becoming, the quiet heartbeat behind the music. By the time he reached adulthood, it was clear he didn't belong in the orchards. He wasn't meant to spend his life under the Nebraska sun. He had something to prove, though he never shouted about it. So, with little more than a suitcase and his bass guitar, he left for Los Angeles. No plan, no safety net. Just a deep, burning need to find where he fit in a world that felt too big and too loud for someone like him. Los Angeles in the 1960s wasn't just a city, it was a battleground of dreams. Everywhere you turned, there were kids with guitars slung over their shoulders, hoping to get noticed. Randy wasn't the flashiest or the most aggressive, but he had something few others did: restraint, taste, emotional control, and a voice that didn't scream. It soared. He joined a handful of small-time bands, played smoky bars, scraped by. But anyone who really listened could tell he was different. He wasn't just another hopeful. He had that rare thing, an ability to disappear into the music while somehow making it unforgettable. Randy Meisner wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing something purer, a place where his voice mattered. And soon, fate would offer him that place. But it would come with a price he never saw coming. Before the world knew his name, Randy Meisner was already laying the foundation for a sound that would change American music. But nothing about that journey was smooth. After arriving in Los Angeles, he bounced from one band to another, trying to find where he belonged. Gigs came and went, money was tight. Some nights, he slept on couches. Other nights, he played bass in front of 10 people who barely looked up from their drinks. But even then, people in the scene noticed. He didn't play to impress. He played with soul. Every note was thoughtful, every harmony instinctive. His first real break came when he joined The Poor, a short-lived band with a rough-around-the-edges style. It wasn't a career maker, but it proved one thing. Meisner could hold his own. He was no longer just a session player or a backup voice. He was becoming the glue that held bands together. But his real turning point came with Poco, a pioneering group that blended country and rock like no one had before. Founded by Richie Furay and Jim Messina after Buffalo Springfield's collapse, Poco wasn't just experimenting, they were reinventing genres. Meisner's voice added a haunting beauty to their harmonies. His bass lines gave their songs depth and subtle weight. But just as Poco's debut album was about to drop, just when the spotlight was finally shifting his way, he was gone. A disagreement about creative control spiraled into a full-blown argument. Meisner wanted more say. The band disagreed. In the end, he walked away. His voice was literally removed from the album's final mix. It was his first taste of the music business's cutthroat side, and it wouldn't be his last. Still, he didn't give up. He joined Rick Nelson's Stone Canyon Band, where he got something more valuable than fame: discipline. Nelson was a perfectionist. Every chord had to be clean, every harmony tight. Meisner learned how to polish his raw talent and perform under pressure. It wasn't glamorous, but it was formative. He finally understood what it meant to be a professional musician, not just an artist, but a craftsman. And then, as fate would have it, everything changed with a single tour. Linda Ronstadt, one of the rising stars of country rock, needed a band. Meisner was brought in on bass. Alongside him were three other players: Don Henley, Glenn Frey, and Bernie Leadon. The chemistry was instant. There was no ego, no friction, just music. After the tour ended, the four of them did something that would change rock history. They didn't say goodbye, they started a band. That band became the Eagles. And while most people would come to know them for Don Henley's sharp lyrics or Glenn Frey's swagger, it was Randy Meisner's soft power. His range, his restraint, his ability to blend emotion into melody, that became the secret weapon no one saw coming. But the peace wouldn't last. Because once success arrived, so did ambition. And Meisner wasn't built for the spotlight. He was built for the music. When the Eagles took flight in the early 70s, most fans fixated on the obvious: Don Henley's brooding vocals, Glenn Frey's songwriting swagger, the band's seamless blend of California country and radio-ready rock. But underneath all of that, quietly, almost invisibly, was Randy Meisner, the band's emotional backbone. He didn't talk much in interviews, he didn't crowd the front of the stage, but when he opened his mouth to sing, something happened. Something that no guitar solo or drum fill could match. He had a voice like no one else in the band. Pure, vulnerable, able to climb into falsetto territory without sounding forced. It wasn't flashy, it was honest. And in a band built on harmony, Meisner's voice was the glue. On tracks like Take It Easy and Peaceful Easy Feeling, you can hear him layered just beneath the surface, elevating everything. But the moment that truly defined him came in 1975 with Take It to the Limit. The song wasn't just a hit, it was an anthem. A slow building storm of piano chords, lyrical longing, and at its peak, Meisner's aching, defiant falsetto. When he hit those high notes near the end, it didn't just show off vocal range, it cracked something open inside people. For a few minutes, he was the Eagles. No backup vocals, no shared harmonies. Just Randy, standing alone, daring the world to feel something real. And yet, he never basked in it. He never capitalized on the moment. While Henley and Frey started to build their reputations as industry powerhouses, networking, negotiating, pushing for more control, Meisner stayed in the shadows. He didn't want to lead. He wanted to play. He wanted the music to speak louder than the politics. That humility made him invaluable. But it also made him disposable, because in the world of platinum albums and sold-out arenas, being quiet doesn't protect you. It makes you a target. As the band's success soared, Meisner became more and more isolated. He didn't fight for airtime. He didn't demand recognition. and as a result, he slowly started to fade into the background, even while standing center stage. But no matter how hard they tried to push him aside, there was one thing no one could replace: his voice. That voice, fragile and fearless at the same time, was unlike anything else in rock music. It made people stop what they were doing and listen. And every time Take It to the Limit played, it reminded fans that behind the Eagles' smooth image was a man who was quietly carrying the weight of the band on his back, until one night he couldn't carry it anymore. To the outside world, the Eagles looked unstoppable. By 1976, they were the biggest band in America, maybe the world. Hotel California had become a phenomenon. Their albums went multi-platinum. Their faces were on magazine covers. Their tours sold out in minutes. And their music was the new American soundtrack. But behind all the harmony on stage, the band was splitting apart, one slow crack at a time. And Randy Meisner was standing right in the middle of it. He was never like the others. Glenn Frey was the sharp-tongued leader, a perfectionist who pushed for control. Don Henley was cerebral and calculating with a sharp business mind. Meisner? He was the opposite. Humble, reserved, happy to be in the background until the background turned into exile. As the band's success ballooned, so did the egos. Every detail became a fight. Who wrote what? Who sang what? Who stood where? And Meisner, despite being a founding member, started losing ground. He'd written songs, co-written more. But when it came time to pick singles or choose who took the lead vocal, his voice was often ignored. In interviews, Henley and Frey were front and center. On stage, they pushed further into the spotlight. Meisner didn't push back, he just swallowed it until he couldn't anymore. The breaking point came during the 1977 tour, right as the band was riding the highest wave of its career. Night after night, Meisner was expected to perform Take It to the Limit, the song that had become a fan favorite and a staple of their live shows. But Meisner wasn't okay. He was sick, he was exhausted, he was emotionally done. Suffering from pneumonia, his voice started to give out. Hitting those high notes wasn't just hard, it was painful. He asked to skip the song, just for one night. Glenn Frey refused. The tension boiled over in Knoxville, Tennessee. Meisner said no. Frey exploded. Backstage, they clashed, first with words, then fists. The quiet bassist, the guy who never raised his voice, finally snapped. For a few minutes, all the bottled-up frustration, the humiliation, the feeling of being sidelined, it came out swinging. No one knows exactly what was said, or who hit who. But what's clear is that it was the end of something. Shortly after that night, Meisner walked away. The public was told he left voluntarily to spend time with family. But insiders knew better. He didn't leave because he wanted to. He left because the band made it unbearable to stay. In his own words, "I was just too tired of touring. It's a crazy life when you live at twice the normal speed. When it came down to sanity or money, I chose sanity." It should have been a break for healing. Instead, it marked the beginning of Meisner's long descent into isolation. Because when the Eagles replaced him, they didn't just move on, they erased him. When Randy Meisner left the Eagles in 1977, the world barely blinked. There were no press conferences, no farewell tour, no dramatic public statements. One moment he was there, on stage, in the band, part of rock history, and the next, he was gone. Replaced without ceremony by Timothy B. Schmidt, the same man who had once taken his spot in Poco years earlier. It was as if Meisner had never mattered, as if his voice hadn't carried some of their most beloved songs. The machine kept rolling without him. And Randy? He stepped into the shadows. He tried to find his footing again. In 1978, he released a self-titled solo album, hoping to carve out a new identity, one that wasn't tied to the Eagles. The music was strong. Songs like Hearts on Fire showed flashes of the brilliance fans knew him for. But something was missing. The momentum, the machinery, the industry power behind the scenes that Glenn Frey and Don Henley had cultivated for years. Meisner had none of it. No polished PR campaigns, no label executives building his brand. Just songs, a soft voice, and an audience that still saw him as the guy who used to be in the Eagles. He released a few more albums throughout the 80s, but none gained serious traction. The industry wasn't built for quiet men like Randy Meisner. It rewarded ambition, aggression, charisma, and he had no interest in playing that game. He didn't want to be a star, he wanted peace. He wanted a life that wasn't dictated by ticket sales or set lists. But peace came with a price: obscurity. Meanwhile, the Eagles soared higher than ever. Don Henley's solo career exploded. Glenn Frey had radio hits and movie soundtracks. Joe Walsh stayed in the spotlight. Meisner? He slowly faded from public view. By the 1990s, when the Eagles shocked the world with their reunion tour, fittingly titled Hell Freezes Over, Randy was nowhere to be found, fans asked. Journalists speculated, why wasn't he there? Officially, he claimed he was never invited. Unofficially, some said he declined due to health concerns. Rumors of emotional instability and long-standing grudges swirled, but no one gave a clear answer. And maybe that was the most painful part. His absence wasn't even treated like a loss. It was treated like a footnote. Behind the scenes, Meisner was struggling. Years of internalized pain, untreated trauma, and unresolved resentment had taken their toll. He battled bipolar disorder. He turned to alcohol as a way to numb the memories. There were no more studio sessions, no more tours. Just long, quiet days spent far from the world that had once cheered his name. He had given his voice to one of the biggest bands on the planet, and now no one was listening. If Randy Meisner had hoped that time away from the spotlight would bring peace, he was wrong. The years after, the Eagles were not gentle, they were haunting. The music faded, the fans moved on, but Meisner was left alone with the noise in his head. Without a band to belong to or a purpose to fight for, the isolation grew heavier. His mental health began to spiral. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder, he struggled to regulate his emotions. Alcohol became both his crutch and his curse. And slowly, the man who once lit up arenas with soaring harmonies vanished into silence. But there was one constant in his life: Lana Ray Meisner. The two married in 1996, and for a time, she was his anchor. She defended him, stood by him when friends and industry contacts drifted away, and tried to help him keep his demons in check. But their love story wasn't simple. Friends say their relationship was intense, fueled by passion, but shadowed by Randy's unpredictable moods and heavy drinking. Arguments were frequent. Trust came and went in waves. Still, Lana remained, even when no one else did. But as the years passed, things got darker. By 2015, Meisner's mental state had deteriorated so much that a court order was issued, placing him under supervised medical care. His behavior had become erratic. He was no longer seen in public. His health was deteriorating, physically and emotionally. And then came the moment that broke everything. In 2016, tragedy struck. Lana Ray Meisner was found dead in their California home from a gunshot wound. According to police, she had accidentally shot herself while trying to retrieve a rifle from a closet. The story was bizarre, unsettling, and almost immediately, speculation flooded in. Some questioned Randy's role. Was it really an accident? Was he involved? His mental state, his history of instability, it all became fodder for headlines. Authorities eventually ruled the incident a freak accident, clearing Randy of any wrongdoing. But the damage was already done. Public doubt lingered. His fragile mental state cracked under the pressure. And from that moment forward, Randy Meisner disappeared entirely. No more interviews, no more public appearances, just silence. Whatever part of him had held on, despite the career loss, the band betrayal, the industry indifference, it shattered when Lana died. She was the last person truly in his corner, and without her, there was no reason to fight anymore. He became a ghost, not just to the public, but to his own past. And while the Eagles continued to tour, celebrate milestones, and perform the songs he helped build, Randy Meisner's name was barely whispered. By the time the 2020s arrived, Randy Meisner was no longer part of the music world or any world the public could see. He wasn't on stage. He wasn't giving interviews. He wasn't even mentioned in Eagles retrospectives. He lived in quiet obscurity, tucked away from the noise, battling the kind of health issues that don't make headlines but slowly erase a person's presence. The man who once sang the sky open with his voice now struggled to breathe. He was suffering from COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a slow, suffocating condition that made even a short walk feel like climbing a mountain. There were no more albums, no tributes, just fading whispers about the man the Eagles had left behind. And then, on July 26, 2023, the silence became permanent. Randy Meisner died at the age of 77 from complications related to COPD. No massive announcement, no fanfare, just a brief statement confirming the news. For fans who remembered the soaring harmonies and the emotional weight of Take It to the Limit, the loss was personal. But for many in the industry, it was just a footnote. There was no grand farewell, no emotional send-off from his former bandmates, at least not right away. The Eagles continued their tour. Glenn Frey's son had joined the band, filling in for his late father. And Meisner? He was still absent, still unmentioned. In many ways, his death mirrored his life after the Eagles. Quiet, painful, and largely invisible. But the fans didn't forget. Online tributes poured in. Clips of his iconic live performances resurfaced. People began sharing memories, interviews, and photos, trying to stitch together a fuller picture of a man who had given so much and received so little in return. The narrative began to shift. No longer was Meisner just the original bassist. He was being remembered as something more, the emotional soul of the band. The one whose voice held up some of their most unforgettable songs. The one who walked away before the machine could destroy what little he had left. And then, something unexpected happened. Don Henley spoke. After days of silence, Henley, the last remaining founding member still with the band, issued a formal statement. It was respectful, thoughtful, but it was what he didn't say that left people talking. He praised Meisner's voice. He acknowledged his role in the band's rise. But he said nothing about why Meisner had been pushed out, nothing about the fights, nothing about the years of silence, the ignored invitations, or the pain that followed. Still, the fact that Henley said anything at all after decades of tension was a sign, a crack in the armor, maybe even the beginning of something resembling closure. But it came too late. For days after Randy Meisner's death, Don Henley said nothing, and that silence grew louder with each passing hour. Fans noticed. Music writers noticed. The man who once shared a stage with Meisner night after night, who built the Eagles alongside him from the ground up, offered no immediate tribute. No post, no quote, just silence. And in that silence, people started to ask the obvious. Was Henley grieving? Or avoiding something? Then, without warning, a statement appeared. Henley finally spoke. In his message, he called Randy Meisner an integral part of the Eagles, a man with a rare gift whose high harmonies elevated the band's sound. He praised Meisner's performance on Take It to the Limit, saying it brought something to the band that no one else ever could. It sounded sincere, it sounded respectful, but to those who knew the band's history, it also felt incomplete. Because Henley didn't mention the 1977 Knoxville fight. He didn't talk about how Meisner had been gradually pushed out of the band, his influence reduced to a footnote. There was no mention of the reunion tours Meisner had been left out of, no acknowledgement of how a founding member of one of the most iconic bands in history had died alone, in obscurity, largely forgotten by the very people he helped put on the map. But then came a rare moment, one that no one expected. In an interview with Rolling Stone, Henley shared a story. One night, years ago, after a show, Randy had pulled him aside. He said, "I wish I had never joined the Eagles." Henley said Meisner looked tired, defeated. He hated everything that came with fame. Henley explained, "One time, he told me that if he could go back in time, He'd rather be a carpenter in Nebraska than a rock star. That sentence hit fans like a gut punch, not because it was surprising, but because it confirmed what many had long suspected. Meisner never wanted the fame. He never wanted the pressure, the politics, the non-stop grind. He didn't want to fight his way to the front. He just wanted to play and be respected for it. Henley didn't elaborate beyond that. He didn't reflect on whether he could have done more, whether the band had failed Meisner, whether pushing him so hard had contributed to his collapse. But to some, the tone of his voice carried something he rarely showed: regret. And it wasn't just Henley. Joe Walsh, the Eagles' longtime guitarist, called Meisner a gentle soul with a powerful voice. Timothy B. Schmidt, who had replaced Meisner not once, but twice, offered an emotional tribute, saying that without Randy, the Eagles would have never had the foundation to stand. For the first time in decades, those who had once moved forward without him were finally looking back. But the words, no matter how kind, came after the fact. Randy Meisner didn't live to hear them. In the end, Randy Meisner's story wasn't just about music. It was about what happens when talent isn't loud enough to compete with ego, when kindness is mistaken for weakness, when someone who helped build the foundation is quietly written out of the blueprint. For decades, Meisner was treated like a supporting character in the Eagles saga, just another name in the credits. But the truth is, without him, the songs wouldn't have soared. The harmonies wouldn't have landed. The band might not have become what it did. His voice was never meant to dominate. It was meant to lift everything around it. That's what he did, again and again, without complaint, without a demand for attention. And maybe that's why so many people forgot, because Randy Meisner never asked to be remembered. But now, as fans revisit his story, replay his songs, and hear those falsetto notes that could still bring chills decades later, they're beginning to realize what was lost. Not just a musician, but a man who embodied something rare in an industry built on self-promotion, humility. He didn't crave fame. He didn't need the spotlight. And maybe that's why his voice still feels so real, because it came from a place of quiet conviction. When he sang "Take It to the Limit," he wasn't just performing. He was showing you who he really was. A man pushed to his edge, still trying to hold the note, still refusing to fall apart in public. Yes, the Eagles continued without him. They found commercial success, filled arenas, released more albums, but something changed after Meisner left. The emotional undercurrent, the quiet magic, was never quite the same. And now that he's gone, the silence he leaves behind is louder than ever. Randy Meisner may have spent the last decades of his life in solitude, battling shadows the public never saw. But his legacy is not a tragedy. It's a reminder that some voices don't fade, they echo, long after the song ends, long after the lights go out. Because every time someone plays "Take It to the Limit," every time his voice climbs through those speakers and grabs you by the heart, Randy Meisner lives again. Not forgotten, not erased, just waiting quietly, like always, for someone to finally listen.